Hello everyone and welcome to this video of the course Robotics. In this video we'll be discussing about robotic system architecture and robotic dynamics. The content that we'll be discussing in this video covers robotic research and current research trends in robotics, robotic control systems. We'll be also discussing about some robotic components, and we'll be having introduction to robotic architecture systems, and we'll be discussing about various types of architecture models like behavioral architecture, abstraction layer architecture, subsumption architecture, and similar other hybrid architecture as well. We'll also be discussing about some idea of autonomous robotic control in this video as well. So let's get started with discussing about the control system in robotics and autonomous robotics part. So the very first thing that this slide covers up is the first slide shows that the current researchers in robotics. So most of the researchers are into multi-robot cooperation in terms of mobile robot. So multi-robot cooperation is something that we try to mimic swarm intelligence or the intelligence possessed by insects like ants and bees, where multi-robot systems cooperate with each other and they do a particular task in a cooperative manner, and they achieve to the target the destination and perform the task with a complete optimality. Another current similar topics are interoperability, software architectures, the telerobotics, intelligent user interfaces to interact with robots, and one of the even most important is human robot interaction and intelligent control systems. Talking about the control structure of a robot, or you can say the robot control loop. So robot needs to first sense the environment so that it can understand where it is exactly, how the world is right now, what the world is right now, and where the robot is, the machine is into that world. For that it needs to have some sensing capability. There's external sensing capability and some internal sensing capability. Talking about external sensing capability such as speech, vision, acceleration, temperature, position, distance, touch, force, magnetic field, light, sound, position, and sense. Internal sensors like acceleration, the speed, amount of current flowing inside the circuits, the voltage part, brakes and all, the direction. So a robot needs to have the idea about itself and the idea about environment. The idea of environment is given by external sensors. The idea about itself, the machine inside architecture, the speed and all is given by internal sensors. So the first thing into the control loop is sensing capability. So sensing to create information which is fed to some algorithm. An algorithm does some processing, and that enables actuators to do some actions, and then we come after sensors to thinking and thinking to actions. So first, once we robot to have the capability of percepting the environment, understanding the environment, using some sort of sensors attached with the robot, it starts thinking, it starts planning the task, in what manner the task has to be performed, classifying the plan, learning from the environment, processing the data, path planning, motion planning. So once this thinking process, which consists of task planning, motion planning, analyzing the data, learning from the environment, and classifying the task, once the thinking process opens up based on the algorithm stored into the robot, then robots comes to action part, where the actuators in the robot triggered and it start acting. In case of acting, it outputs the information move, it moves forward, backward, left or right, or stops, speed up, speed down. It gets some speeches, or it generates some text, some visual wheels, leg. It might be having some arms for picking and placing, so it does that part as well. So this complete loop, and from that again it senses using internal sensors. Again the process begins up, whether the task was performed properly or not. Again thinking process starts up. Again that converts to action process, triggers the action process more accurate. Again the next state of robot comes up, where again new external sensors generate new data. The new data mixed up with the old internal sensor data. creates an algorithm, some triggers which can help the robot to perform more accurately, more precisely. So this is the robot control loop. The next thing that we are going to discuss in this control loop is which of the components robot use to sense, to think, to act, and which are the components there into robotic system. So in a robotic system, the components that are used consist of a manipulator, or you can say rover. So manipulator rover is the main body of the robot that consists of some links, joints, structural element of the robot. It could be the arms, it could be the chassis of the robot, it could be the main structure of the robot which creates the central mass of the robot. And then it comes the end effector, which is used by the robot to perform some action, to perform some end action, and to do some tasks, to interact with the real environment. Then we talk about actuators. Actuators are actually into the chassis of the robot, which help the robot to move, to manipulate, to do some action, or to move the end effector part to a particular location. So actuators are in actual way the muscles of the manipulators. Some of the actuators can be servo motors, stepper motors, pneumatic cylinders, or hydraulic cylinders. And then the next component that comes up is sensors. Sensors helps a robotic system to collect some information around the world and getting some information about external world, how the external world is right now. For example, the temperature of the external world, the objects moving in and around, the light in the external world, the pressure in the air, and some internal state of the robot, how robot is acting up, how much accuracy is provided, and to collect some information about the internal state of the robot to communicate with the outside environment. The next topic is controller. So controller is kind of similar to cerebellum of a robot. It controls and coordinates the motion of the actuator. It acts as the output controller part of system. And processor, the final part, is the brain of the robot. It actually calculates the motions and the velocity of the robot's joint. And the software, which is operating system, the robotic software, and the collection of routines, the instructions which fits up and which controls all the stuff using the processor into that. So this is all about robotic component system, which consists of manipulators and effectors, actuators, sensors, controller, processor, and software. Talking about effector versus actuator. So effector is the endpoint of the robot, whereas actuator is the other motor or other moving part of the robot. So end effectors are generally used to pick and place and do some end task, whereas actuators are used to move end effectors to the exact location. So they can be into some sort of degree of freedom in a free space according to how much bends they can take into the free space. Actuators helps the robot to do some locomotion, statically stable or dynamically stable, and to manipulate rotary versus prismatic motion, and effectors as well do some manipulation part. Sensors like force sensing, tactile sensing, sonar, visual, proprioceptive sensors helps the robot to understand the real-time environment. Vision system, motion planning system, radar system, lidar systems helps the robot to understand the inner environment and to understand the environment where the robot is exactly and how a set of actions it should perform. Talking about the classical architecture of robotics is all about when we used to work with traditional industrial robots, which used to perform sort of tasks like moving and picking and placing one object 1000 times or 10,000 times a day. So in that, what was main objective in those sort of robots is to achieve optimality. Optimal in the sense, if the robot has to perform the same task 10,000, 100,000 times a day, it has to have the optimality so that it can do minimum error, more precise it could be. Whereas the talking about mobile robots are more about unconsistent working in inconsistent of environment. For example, a traditional industrial robot which is just picking and placing an object from the conveyor belt. So set of environment it is going to come across is limited, is fixed, it is completely deterministic. That some objects will be coming on the conveyor belt, it has to just pick them up and place at a particular place in a bin. So the set of environment in that case is fixed. So a robot can be programmed to perform a set of optimality, you can say around 90 to 100% of optimality, and to perform the same task 10,000 or 100,000 of times throughout the day. That's what we mean by when we talk about classical and traditional architectures. But it has certain limitations, because if you talk about mobile robots, or general robot which interact with the environment. Now, set of environment in general physical world can vary. It's completely under stochastic. It's completely unpredictable. If a mobile robot is wandering here and there for exploring purposes, so the set of environment might get the set of values or set of output devices, input sensory information it might get is completely unpredictable. So in that case, classical architecture has some sort of shortcomings. Compared to that, talking about behavior-based architecture, where the robot understands the environment based on sensor, it does some process like some basic process, some basic layers of process like avoiding objects in the environment, then building map of the inner environment based on the obstacle detected in the environment, then identifying the objects, which are the objects and what they do, what they mean exactly, and how they are related to the goal of the robot for the task it has to perform, and reason about the behavior of object, how they are behaving up, how they are reacting of the environment, and analyzing that sort of environment and doing reasoning based on that, and then finally they trigger the actuator part. So this is the design of basic behavior based model robot, which is generally adapted from the book by Stewart and Russell from AIMA. Next thing that we'll be discussing is the actuator control of the robot. To get a particular robot actuator to a particular location, it is important to apply the current amount of force or torque to it. So that requires the knowledge of dynamics of the robot. In case of dynamics, the dynamics of robot requires the mass, the inertia, the friction, and as soon as robot is moving, how the center of mass is shifting from one position to another position. For a simplistic mobile robot, F equals to ma plus bv, like frequency actuators are treated as if they were independent, as moving one joint would not affect any other joint, but generally moving one joint is going to affect the center of mass shifting into another joint as well, and that is going to change the amount of torque moving on to the another joint or another motor into the robotic system. So the most common control approach is we generally used to use PID approach, but the most common approach we use is PDA control approach, that is proportional differential control approach. So for a simple robot, mobile robot moving in direction X, the amount of force could be Kp, that is proportional coefficient multiplied by X desired minus X actual, plus Kd multiplied by V desired minus V actual. There's a difference between the error between the actual and desired location, plus Kd multiplied by the difference between actual and desired speed, velocity. So this is all about actuator control using dynamics of robotics. And then it comes the robot navigation, which we actually mean by the path planning or the task planning of a robot. So path planning addresses the task of computing a trajectory for the robot such that it reaches the desired goal without colliding the obstacles. Optimal paths are hard to compute in a particular robot that can move in the arbitrary direction, that is non-holonomic robots. But the shortest distance paths can be dangerous since they always graze obstacles. It is not always possible that if the robot is achieving optimality, it is going to be more utility based as well. It could be more dangerous. The paths for robot arms have to be taken into account the entire robotic structure, not only the end effector part. So while planning the path, the complete components, each and every component of the robot has to be taken into consideration while planning and addressing the task of computing a trajectory or moving from a location to another location. So now we'll be talking about some sort of techniques for robot control. One of them is sensor-driven robot control. So to accurately achieve a task in an intelligent environment, a robot has to be able to react dynamically to the changes in and around in its surrounding. Robot needs some sensor to perceive the environment, to understand the environment, to understand the current state of environment. And most robots use a set of different sensors like proximity sensors, some ultrasonic or lidar sensors, vision sensors which helps us to understand the environment. Some different sensors serve different purposes, like ultrasonic sensor might serve the purpose of analyzing the distance, how far the object is. Proximity sensor might help it to do some vision system, provided vision kind of stuff where the object is there or not. Information from the sensor has to be integrated into the control of the robot. So one of the robot control architecture that we're going to see and talk about is deliberative robot control architecture. So in case of deliberative control architecture, the robot first plans a solution for the task by reasoning about the outcome of its actions and then executes it. The robot first tries to understand what will be the output after doing certain actions and then tries to feed them into certain sequences and then tries to execute them. The control process in this case, in case of deliberative robotic control architecture, goes through a sequence of sensing, model update, and planning steps. For example, the sensors give some data to understand the robot to perceive the environment, then it models some task, what it has to do, plans some task, and then it executes some task. And that task execution controls some motors which triggers some actuators in the robotic system. So this basic idea of deliberative robot control architecture in the robotic system. Next is advantages in deliberative robotic control architecture is we have reasons about contingencies. It computes solutions to the given task. It's more goal-directed strategies. It's having more goal-directed strategies. The problems in deliberative control architectures are solutions tend to be fragile in presence of uncertainty. It requires frequent replanning, and most importantly, it reacts relatively slowly to changes and gives a lot of unexpected occurrences. And next important architecture, which is one of the well-known architecture in today's world for mobile robotic systems, is behavior-based robot control architecture. In behavior-based robot control architecture, the robot's actions are determined by a set of parallel reactive behaviors which map sensory inputs and states to the actions. So in a behavior-based architecture, the sensors feed the data which helps the robot to perceive the environment, and rather than building the complete state of robot in a very optimal way, for example, rather than making the complete vision system an optimal system, rather than making the complete reasoning system an optimal system, rather than making the complete the acting part system or actuator system the optimal part, layer by layer execution is done. In that, first layer could be low level management or low level intelligence, where the robot is only avoiding obstacles, and then robot is wandering, robot is exploring, robot is building maps, the robot is monitoring the changes, identifying the objects, and plans the changes to the world, and then reasons about the behavior object, and then finally it triggers the actuators. So behavior based robotic control architecture is more reactive. It combines relatively simple behaviors, each of which achieve a particular subtask to achieve the overall task. So rather than making the robot complete optimal to achieve the complete task or optimality, the layers of robots are built, and each and every layer contributes to achieving the complete task, to achieve the goal of the robot. In this case, robots can react fast to changes, and the complete system does not depend on the complete knowledge of the environment. Even some part of the knowledge of environment can help the robot to react and take actions based on that. So in this case, in case of behavior based robot control architecture, the set of environment need not to be completely deterministic, need not to be completely fully observable. The emergent behavior resulting from combining the internal behavior can make it difficult to predict the exact behavior, and it is difficult to assure that the overall task is achieved in case of behavior based architecture. There are some complex behavior from simple elements. The slide is taken from Braitenberg Vehicles, the book by him, Vehicles in the Real World. And Braitenberg Vehicles are one of the easiest way to understand that using simple techniques, the complex behavior could be easily analyzed, could be easily made. So Braitenberg Vehicles use some differential motor robots with two light sensors, and according to Braitenberg, the complex external behavior does not necessarily require a complex reasoning mechanism. According to Braitenberg, the synthesis and the execution of robotic system is quite easy than analysis part. So analysis has to be fully done in robot architecture system. Then after that, the complete coding or programming part comes up. So the complex behavior is quite easy to code, quite easy to program, rather than the complex reasoning mechanism. So the first robot you can see, which is having some forward differential two differential motors, and two light sensors which are directly connected up. So if the light sensor are reaching towards the light, and at the time it is reaching up to the light, the left light sensor will be having less light, whereas the right sensor will be having more light, which will make the robot to bend from the light. So this kind of architecture is more called fear ring robot, or you can say covered robot. When the robot is moving towards the light, the left sensor will have less light, whereas the right sensor will have more light. So that will make the robot bend, because that makes change in the speed of the two motors. So that will make the robot bend, and you can say fear from the light. So this is called a covered mechanism or fear mechanism. Whereas another, if you talk about where the sensors are exchanged from the motors. So as soon as the robot is reaching to the light, both the motor will try to bend each other and will try to go away from each other, and this is more aggressive, or you can say more breakage kind of stuff, which will make the robot to break and to destroy itself. And another is the law mechanism, where the sensors are directly connected to the wheels in an invert manner, and that will make the robot to attract to other robots which are having lights. So this is where the robot will find a partner and will stick to them. Another is explore mechanism, where the wheels are reversed to the sensors, and that will make the robot to turn around and keep on walk around the light sensors part. So that is kind of exploring the robot. So all these mechanisms are easy to code according to Braitenberg. So according to Braitenberg, the complex external behavior need not necessarily required complex reasoning mechanism. Easy reasoning mechanism, easy understanding mechanism, easy architecture mechanism can also make complex behaviors coming out of the robots. The advantages of behavior-based control architectures involves the behavior-based architectures makes the robot react fast to changes, and it does not rely on accurate models. The world is its best model, and no need for replanning, because each and every layer is independent of each other, and the lower layer is independent of the high layer, and high layer depends on lower layer, like that. And the problems that you find in behavior-based control architecture is it is difficult to anticipate what effect combinations of behavior will have, and it's difficult to construct strategies that will achieve the complex and novel tasks. And generally, the behavior-based control architecture requires redesign of control system for new tasks. And the solution to these problems of the traditional architecture and the behavior-based architecture is hybrid control architecture. The hybrid control architecture combines the reactive control with abstract task planning, with the layer task planning. One of the technique of programming is layer of abstractions. That's what we see in behavioral-based architecture, where you program each and every layer independently, and then combination of those layers does some sort of task, even in the partially observable environment. So hybrid architecture is combination of reactive control along with this abstraction of task layer programming. So abstraction task planning layer includes the deliberative decisions, includes the plans goal oriented policies, whereas reactive behavior layer involves it provides the reactive actions and handles the sensors and actuators. Generally, the sensors give data to the behavior set of architecture, and then the data is pre-processed sensor data is given to the abstraction task planner, and from there some activations are generated, which again triggers some motors or actuators. We'll discuss more about making such robots and using such robots in real-time environments. So stay tuned for further discussion. We'll be using some boards like programmable systems and making such a behavior-based mobile robots which will react with the environment in layer by layer abstraction model, and which will interact with the environment in a proper way. So we'll talk about some Arduinos, programmable systems, some motors and DC motors, involving them, attaching them with some sensors, and working with them in next video. So stay tuned for next videos, and thank you for watching this video.